Okay, so today we are going to jump right into biochemistry. Biochemistry is basically the study of all the chemicals and all the chemical reactions within living organisms. Um, Love it. I'm a biochemist by training, so we had to do organic first in order to understand all of the organic structures and all of that. And now we're going to use everything we've learned in the past few weeks in order to fully understand biochemistry. Okay, so what are the four major molecules we're going to be focusing on in biochemistry? There are four major macromolecules. Macro just meaning big, okay? Number one, carbohydrates. Let's call them carbohydrates, not carbs, please. Number two, lipids. Lipids, fancy word for fats, okay? Number three, proteins. Proteins, I'm going to put a smiley face here because I did a lot of my research on proteins. I love proteins. And then number four, nucleic acids. Okay, so we're going to first start off with carbohydrates. All right, so I'm going to just erase this and let's start off with carbohydrates. Carbohydrates structurally are polyhydroxy ketones and aldehydes. So since you've had the intro organic or the beginning parts of organic, the basics, you understand this terminology. So what I'm telling you is that a carbohydrate is usually going to be a ketone, has a ketone group or an aldehyde group, but it also has a whole bunch of OH or hydroxy groups. Okay? Now, what are some functions of carbohydrates in your body? Well, number one, they provide energy. If you've had a nutrition class, you know that carbohydrates provide 4 calories per gram, 4 kilocalories per gram. Number two, you can store carbohydrates as glycogen, storage as glycogen, and you can store it in the liver and in the muscle. You've heard of athletes carb loading, and they're trying to store as much glycogen in their muscle as possible before they go do a marathon or an Ironman or some crazy thing like that. Number three, they actually provide the carbon skeleton for other biological molecules. What do I mean by that? It means that you can get the carbons from a carbohydrate in your body and turn them into components of lipids, fats, or into components of protein, of amino acids, which will be the building blocks of proteins. All right, number four, they are an important part of DNA and RNA. If you've had a bio class, you may know what the D stands for. D is deoxyribo, and then this is deoxyribonucleic acid, and this is ribonucleic acid. Well, deoxyribo, it comes from the word deoxyribose, which is a carbohydrate, and this R is ribose, which is a carbohydrate, so you're going to see that. Number five, they are also part of the plasma membrane. You know, every cell surrounded by a plasma membrane, and you may have heard in biology that this is, you know, a phospholipid bilayer. Well, sometimes you get these carbohydrates on that plasma membrane as glycolipids, and also they could be part of, attached to proteins like glycoproteins. And this is a way that cells can sometimes communicate with each other. So anyway, a whole bunch of different functions for carbohydrates. And we are ready now to differentiate between all of the different carbohydrates. So looking at our what you need to know list, we're going to know the name and, oh, let me see if I have it. Yeah, here's my what you need to know list. We're going to know the classification of carbohydrates. All right, so this is what we're going to do first. We're going to classify carbohydrates as monosaccharides, disaccharides, oligosaccharides, and polysaccharides. Just from the prefixes here, this is running out. Just from the prefixes, you could see that mono just means one sugar unit. Di means two sugar unit. The word saccharide just is sugar unit. Okay? Oligo usually means anywhere between 3 and 10. Sometimes they'll lump in the disaccharides in with the oligosaccharides. And then poly usually means more than 10 sugar units. Okay? All right, so if you've got a monosaccharide, you can further classify it as an aldose or a ketose. So this is a monosaccharide that has an aldehyde unit in it. It's called an aldose. A monosaccharide that's got a ketone in it, it's called a ketose. And then you can further classify these based on the number of carbons. So if your carbohydrate monosaccharide has 3 carbons, it's called a triose. Well, if it's got an aldehyde and it's 3 carbons, it could be called an aldotriose. If it's 4 carbons, it's called a tetrose. If it's 5 carbon, it's called a pentose. And if it's 6 carbons, it's called a hexose. All right? If you're dealing with a ketohexose, that means it's a 6 carbon monosaccharide that has a ketone group in it. That's just the general terminology that we use. All right. I'm going to draw out the simplest trioses, okay? One of them is an aldotriose and the other one is a ketotriose. So we're going to draw them as open chain. We call these open chain Fisher projections. So I'm just going to draw it out like this, and I'll explain what I'm doing in a second here. This is called glyceraldehyde. We are going to start using common names in biochemistry. We're not going to be using IUPAC names anymore, just common names. Wow, that's a helicopter up there. I don't know if you heard that. All right, this is glyceraldehyde. The other triose I'm going to draw is this one here. You can see glyceraldehyde is an aldotriose. This one, let me move this down. Go. This is called, let me try to squeeze it in here, dihydroxy. This is all one word. Continue on over here. Acetone. Sorry about that. Remember, acetone was a 3-carbon ketone. So this is called dihydroxyacetone. This is called glyceraldehyde. These are the 2 trioses I need you guys to know. One is an aldotriose. One is a ketotriose. We're going to see both of them in glycolysis later on in the semester. All right. I need to teach you about what a chiral carbon is. chiral carbon. The term chiral carbon means it's a carbon that has 4 completely different groups attached to it. Not completely different atoms, just completely different groups. So let's take a look. See this carbon here? It doesn't have 4 bonds going to 4 totally different things. It has 2 bonds going to this oxygen. So that's not considered a chiral carbon. But look at this carbon over here. I'm going to circle everything in red. This carbon here has 1 bond going to this OH, 1 bond going to this aldehyde group, 1 bond going to this H, and 1 bond going to what sort of looks like a methanol type group. Okay, but notice how these 4 things circled in red are completely different. So this is called a chiral carbon. Look on the other hand at dihydroxyacetone. Do you see any chiral carbons here? This carbon has 2 bonds going to the exact same thing. This is a hydrogen, this is a hydrogen, so this isn't chiral. This one also has 2 bonds going to exactly the same type of thing. This isn't chiral. And this one has 1 bond going to this, 1 bond going to this. These 2 are identical, and these 2 bonds are going to oxygen, so this one has no chiral carbon. So you need to be able to look at a structure and determine how many chiral carbons are in that structure. Okay, we'll do some more in the next video.